Hello everyone, happy Friday. Welcome back to a brand new video. I hope you're all doing well. Today I am using up some of my leftover colors that are still on my palettes. And I decided I wanted to keep exploring the floral theme a little bit more. And so my main goal right now is just to put down a background that I can put my florals on top of later. The goal is to keep these colors pretty light so that they don't interfere with whatever goes on top next too much. These are all Daniel Smith watercolors that I have been using for other projects, and they all go really well together. I am not particular where the colors go, and I am also holding off on the green because I know I want to put leaves on there next, and so it doesn't really need any green in the background. Of course, if you want to do this, you don't have to put down a background first. That is completely optional. I could have started with a white background, but I just like to have something there. It helps me get over the where am I going to place things and that initial irrational fear of a blank canvas. I know I want to put more flowers on this background today, and I have been looking at inspiration photos, but I couldn't really find what I wanted. And also, florals are fairly new to me, and so I just want to keep it very simple today. So this is what the result looks like, and as you can see, it has brightened up quite a bit. I decided to stick with something super simple so as to not overwhelm myself too much. So what I'm doing is putting down some circle type shapes. I am leaving them kind of wonky. That is the whole point, because they're abstract flowers and I want that to come across. I also want to do kind of a gradient going towards the middle. In hindsight, I probably could have skipped that step because it could have saved me quite a bit of time. Doing this style, you have to dry each layer fully, otherwise the colors are just gonna blend into each other, and that is not the point. But in the end, I kind of covered it all up, and so I could have just left it that way, but I didn't know that at the time. I am still using the same colors on top of each circle, and I'm not intensifying the colors either. I just keep putting more layers on top of what is already there. Ranunculus are some of my favorite flowers, and I kind of loosely wanted to base these on them. However, once I continued putting down the lines later on, it kind of disappeared and it looked a little bit more like a rose type. So I'm not sure if I ever were to try this again, if I could make it look more like a ranunculus. I probably could have just left it, without the lines, but, and I will explain that when we get to it, there was a reason why I wanted to put the white and black lines down. Next challenge that I had was, do I do 3 or 4 or more of those buds? I tend to do uneven numbers because, to my eye at least, I feel like it looks better. It's more balanced that way. But I decided to go ahead and do 4 and just take myself out of that comfort zone. I got impatient waiting for those layers to dry, and so I decided to start with the greenery. And if you have watched a couple of my previous videos, this and a couple other ones might look super familiar, and I hope you don't mind that I keep reusing them. I really like how they look, and it just adds a different kind of greenery shape to the overall picture. I ended up liking having put down 4 of those flowers in because it looked more of a bouquet rather than maybe a still life. And so now I'm just filling in some of those empty spots with more greenery. I wanted to have a few different types, just like you would find in an actual bouquet. I am still waiting for the layers of the flowers to dry, and so I'm continuing on with the greenery. Later on, I decided to take the hairdryer to it. I don't like using a hairdryer. I like to let everything dry on its own, but I got impatient and I had other things to do, so I decided to break that rule and just take the hairdryer to it. As you can see, now that I keep layering and layering on top, it gives the illusion of different petals. I kind of wished I had made those circles even more irregular. As I was continuing with the circles or these shapes, I got a little braver and made them a little bit more wavy, and I should have done that earlier on to give it more of that illusion of them being individual petals, because the ranunculus is a very tight flower bud until it opens up fully, and also ranunculus have a different color on the inside altogether. I did not do that because I just didn't want to be bothered with using yet another color, but you know, you get the idea. And now that I can get that feeling of it being a bouquet, I am deciding to add more different kinds of flowers. Obviously, they don't necessarily exist in real life, and that is not the point. The point is for this to be abstract, loose, and less of an actual replica of a bouquet. I have discovered a couple new things and now I want to keep bringing them back, and this is part of me trying to familiarize myself with something new. The more I practice the same thing over and over, the better I get, and that is usually how I approach my learning. I really wanted to bring back the pods that I did last week, but I had to remind myself that there is surely going to be another time and place for those to come back. I don't necessarily have to bring them back immediately. Now we're getting into a little bit of a trial and error phase. I am still trying to find a good way to apply white lines, and I have mentioned that I purchased these glass pens and that I've been trying them out, but I have not been able to find a good white. Well, I came across the Dr. Martin's black ink and then also this white for dip pens, or it says airbrush, and I was hoping that it would be thin enough for me to use the dip pens with. However, when I opened it up, it was very thick, and when I dipped the pen in at that point, I realized it wasn't going to work. So what I did here is I just added some in a dish, and then I diluted it quite a bit with water, and that seemed to help, although as you can see, I am struggling a lot in getting those lines onto the paper. I probably would have had better success by just using a fine liner brush, but I really wanted to give these pens a try. I also didn't like that I outlined where I put those shapes down. In the other purple flower on the other side, I decided to approach those lines a little bit different, just to give it a little bit more of a ranunculus feel, and then I ended up not liking it in the end at all. And I don't know if it was because the lines themselves are so uneven, because it feels very busy. Here you can see what I meant. I am trying to give the illusion that there are different petals in this tight flower, and it just looks very messy and busy. But I am not one to give up quickly, and so I just really wanted to give this pen a try. It is a messy business, and right now I don't recommend it. That doesn't mean that I am going to chuck this idea for the future. I am sure that it is probably just user error and inexperience on my part. I also found that the thicker of the three pens that I have, the medium size I should say, worked way better, but that also means that the lines aren't going to be as fine. And because I diluted the white so much to make it work, it ended up not being white in the end, meaning it took on the color that was underneath. Now the black is a different story. The black I had no issues using. What I did have an issue with was it spread quite a bit on top of the watercolor, and maybe it's also because it's watercolor paper. As you can see, those lines are very thick. That's not what I wanted, but it is something that I now know and that I can hopefully avoid next time. I did switch back to the thinnest of the dip pens, and as you can see, it's still giving me these very, very thick lines. Well, they're not super thick, but you know what I mean. Compared to this very soft background, those black lines look a little bit out of place. I am planning on doing a full review of these dip pens, and that requires me to play around with them a lot more. Right now, I am not listing them down below because I don't want to suggest something that I can't stand fully behind. Once I know how to use them, I will let you know, and then I will list everything below. This was the first white that I purchased, also Dr. Martens, and that is even thicker than the other white that I used. And so I decided that that might be a good one to use with my dotting tools, because the colors underneath don't bleed into the white. I have had issues in the past with the acrylic paint that I have been using. Once the paint sits on the watercolor a little bit longer, it tends to take on the color that is underneath. And hopefully with this white, that won't happen. Not that this piece needed any more texture, but I really wanted to do the veining with the pencils. I lied. I did switch to a different pen in the end because the other white lines were just too darn uneven. I couldn't take it, and so I then switched to the Posca pen in the end. I would really like to find a pen that I can either refill or use as like a fountain pen. Maybe I should try. I have fountain pens that I could possibly try the white with. My only issue is I feel like it would clog up too fast. And because I had this issue even with the dip pen, what you don't see is me cleaning the tips very often throughout using it, and so I have a feeling that even a fountain pen would clog up too quickly. So yeah, the quest in finding the perfect white pen is still out there for me. But another thing that I found I really liked in this painting was using the same shape that I did with watercolor, but then just take the pencil and instead of filling it in, just leaving the outline. It kind of helps fill in some of those bare spots without it blending together and then not knowing where one starts and where one stops. So I think I want to keep trying out that as well. And here, as you can see, in an effort of me trying to not make these black lines look so harsh, I then went over with a colored pencil and just go over the black lines a little bit, and I think that helped a little bit. I'm still not exactly happy with how it's looking, but you know, at least I think I was able to rectify those harsh black lines a little bit. I think I learned a lot with this piece, and I hope that by me explaining my thought process and share with you my findings and what worked and what didn't work, it also helps you learning what you might want to do next time in your painting. As always, thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know if you want to try something like this for yourself, and I hope to see you next time.